Free content acts both as a marketing tool and at the same time making it possible for people to have access to important, interesting or amusing content. John Buckman is a .com entrepreneur.
I started a company with my wife. It was the third company that I'd started. The first two I'd botched and eventually drove into the ground. This was a very simple idea, simply that if you have a website, you could have a field that says, sign up for our newsletter. Well, some software has to do that. So I created the software to do this, and after 6 years, I believe, we finally grew to a size where I had, I think, 4 employees. And then after a few more years, it started to grow, and eventually, when the dot-com bust happened, we did fairly well, and I got to sell the company. At that point, it had 50 employees. But you have to keep in mind that it took 12 years to get to that point, and countless experiments before. In 2003, I created Magnatune, and the idea behind this was to do something that I'd be very passionate about. And it looked like the music business was really having problems. The major labels were starting to cut all the music genres that weren't blockbusters. And so a lot of music I love, classical, electronic music, was vanishing. At the same time, I thought there might be a market opportunity if I could provide music to these less major genres. The business model behind Magnatune is, one is to sell to consumers and one is to sell to companies. The idea behind selling to consumers is that they come to the website, they listen to music. If they like it, they can buy a download or a CD. The motivation behind that was actually not so much to make money off consumers. It's really hard to make money just one little consumer sale at a time. The real business model, I thought, would be licensing to larger companies, largely because the labels who control this do it all with lawyers. It's all very expensive, and it's kind of unpleasant to deal with. When I started Magnatune in 2003, I had 2 problems I had to solve, and Creative Commons had just launched about 2 months earlier. So the first problem was, if I had MP3s on my website that people could download or listen to, there needs to be some sort of license attached with that that gives you some sort of right to do that. And Creative Commons was an easy solution there. So the trick was finding a license that made people comfortable, at the same time still had a business model that made people want to pay for it. So the Creative Commons license, on the one hand, was to let people visit the website and see if they like the music. But there was another business model, which was one based more in open source. Companies like MySQL have a dual licensing business model. What that means is that a company can come and download their software, use it in a non-commercial capacity, or use it rather in a license that comes for free. And if they want to use a different license, they have to pay. What that entails essentially is the non-commercial or the open sector being subsidized by the commercial sector. It's also a marketing strategy so that you get widespread use of your good, your music, your software, and then a smaller percentage convert and pay. The parallels between the music world, at least as articulated by Magnatune, and the print world, I think there's a few of them. One simply is lower marketing costs by using Creative Commons and other open source strategies. What that means is, by allowing people to share your music or share your work under certain terms, you get your work distributed in a much larger capacity. The second is, frankly, that Creative Commons gets a free ride with the press and the public. People just feel really good about it. Recently, I set up Bookmooch, which is a book swapping site, and the idea is very simple. If you have a book you don't want, you list it. If someone else wants it, you send it to them. Every time you send a book to somebody else, you have the right to ask anyone else in the network to send you a book. Very simple idea. If you execute it decently, hopefully it'll be a certain scale. The reason I set it up the way I did, as opposed to Magnatune, is one of the mistakes I made with Magnatune was still being an older model where I choose the music that's best and people come to my site and I do all the work and they consume it. That has a lot of strong suits. People are used to paying in that way, and certainly other companies are more comfortable with that model. But it has a scaling problem, which is if I want more music, more deals, I need to buy more attention. I need to get more staff to look at everything. So with Bookmooch, I took a much more decentralized approach, which was to let people connect with each other directly, and I'm simply the platform for making that happen. The community that's building around Bookmooch and the community around Magnatune are both what I would call accidental communities. They're not one where some business plan sets out to create a community website. Rather, there's real utility to the website and what it offers. And a community, or rather people of similar interest, gather around it to add value on their own. The way to make money with Bookmooch, to use the word accidental again, it's making money by accident. And what I mean by that is that primarily people are going to the site, at least initially, because of the promise of free books. Then what happens is they start collecting a list of books that they might want to buy. Hopefully they can get them for free, maybe not. What we're finding is, because it's a community of readers that gets more and more excited about reading, they use Bookmooch to find out about books, to keep track of all the books they might want to read, and they're buying it in fairly large numbers. We've been so far in business for a year and a half, and every year, or rather every 12 months, we're making about $500,000 in book sales for Amazon, which is considerable for a brand new company with no marketing spend. The $500,000 that we sell of books for Amazon currently covers our operating costs because Amazon pays us about 8.5% of every sale. It's nice because it's just a check in the mail every month, and we never actually have to have a warehouse or anything. And as we expand, I think I'm going to have more and more partnerships with publishers and bookshops. One idea I had for Bookmooch was to be the largest bookstore in the world. After all, what could be larger than everyone's home bookshelf aggregated into one site? That could be bigger than any warehouse you could ever build. Now, it's a little weird to call it a bookstore because everyone's getting the books for free, but there's a currency. It's a mooch point. You have to earn it by sending books out. So it's a bookstore, it just uses a different cash currency. That's interesting, and as it grows in scale, it's going to become, I think, quite interesting to other people. Somehow, for some reason, I like to goad Amazon a little bit, and I say, well, my goal with Bookmooch is to trade more books in a year than Amazon could ever hope to sell. Well, we're a few years from that happening, but you can imagine at least that people trading books directly between each other could have a much larger scale than centralized warehousing and sending. And at that point, obviously, someone would be interested in capitalizing on that. If Bookmooch could have a lot of direct contact with the most voracious readers out there, that could be quite valuable for someone who would like to figure out what kind of books should get printed, how that book should get to its audience, who should we speak to. That's where I think the value really is, and that's how we'd try to figure out a number. In the publishing world, to give some examples, if you use a Creative Commons non-commercial license or a Creative Commons share-alike license, that would restrict the kind of profit that you may not be comfortable with being made on your product without you getting a share of it. Use one of those licenses, and lots of people can try out their ideas, but they can't make money. When the idea looks good, like they've got funding or they're selling something, well, they're already entrenched. They've already proven that your work and their ideas are a good one. And then they have to negotiate with you and do a license. That is actually, in essence, the Magnatune B2B business model. Use our music for free, which people do all the time in advertisements in films before they are used commercially. And when they're going on television or film, then you have no choice, and everyone's fallen in love with our music and they have to write us a check.
And so we've seen how you can use the web to generate new sources of income and create sustainable business models. There are risks, and there's no established easy guidebook on how to go about it. But after looking at some solutions, you may decide to become part of this growing global phenomenon.